Hello, this will be part 6 in the series, An Ancient Legacy, and after many years now studying this, looking into it, putting pieces together, building on other people's research, and well, a theory keeps growing, and the more evidence that comes, it backs this up. And the basis of this, and my philosophy, is weights and measures. I don't particularly, I'm not opposed, but I think especially when it comes to religious, those type of descriptions, there's a lot of value in there, not taking nothing away. But to speak to the skeptics, so to speak, or to try and break the establishment narrative, I think that weights and measures is the key, because it's empirical evidence. It's very hard not to, as where a religious text might be interpreted one way or another, and you're always going to have that problem. Weights and measures points that it's measurable, it's testable, and that's why I think it's so important. That's why I use this logo, because we're measuring length, measuring angles or direction, we're measuring weight, we also have time, temperature, and pressure. And these are the basics still to this day of the modern hard sciences. And it's pretty obvious that the ancient people also had quite an impressive understanding of engineering and the sciences, especially through weights and measures. But more importantly, they were able to imbue their weights and measures with a deeper meaning. And weights and measures, of course, I've done some other series on these. It's built into the legends. It's part of the society, the trade, but literally also the symbolism and the legends. It's hidden in plain sight, so to speak. Now, for instance, Thoth, Hermes, or later Mercury, gods of weights and measures, gods of knowledge, aka science, also connected to magic. And what is magic? Well, magic is, as Arthur C. Clarke said, any advanced science will appear as if magic to those who do not understand it. And that's why Thoth, Hermes, and Mercury also are so important, is because they're gods of knowledge, they're gods of weights and measures. By definition, they're gods of engineering, and that's why it's how did they, without weights and measures, without science, without knowledge, we would never have had these. All the great structures are dependent on weights and measures, and that's why it's so important. Not only can it be tested, but it's self-evident that without an advanced knowledge of construction, of engineering, and also all the other sciences that go with it, because it's not just the building itself, it's also how do you arrange a society, how do you arrange a system of laws that is capable to organize itself to build these things. And then when you start building, you need accuracy, you need understanding of the pressure above to construct the internal chambers and all the things that go with, whether it's the pyramids, the Parthenon, Stonehenge, understanding the way stone works, understanding how to lift things, how to move things, so basic, like understanding how pulleys work. If you see someone, when they first explain a block and tackle to you, it's anti-gravity for all intents and purposes. One person can lift many times their own weight. They can actually 1,000 times their own weight using steel and the modern block and tackle chain block technology. But of course, that goes back to ancient times. Ancient sailors, such as the Phoenicians, even up to the last days of sail, they had to understand the mechanical advantage of block and tackle and levers. And that's why these sciences are so important to us today. And of course, they could not have done these things without them in the past. And that's why weights, measures, tools, for instance, in Roman times as well, surveyors and engineers were virtually priests for their time. And we still see a legacy of the importance of weights and measures, pendulums, or the plumb bob, again, written into the legends, written into the books of law, written into the mythology. So important, and it's undeniable how important it is still to this day. But now we're going to have a look at, in this particular video, it's going to be a follow-on from the last, where I looked at sidereal month connections. Our sidereal month is one orbit of the moon around the Earth in relation to a star. So you can say it's a relationship of Earth, moon and star. And these themes, of course, are very important in still to this, for instance, Freemasons being the most famous, the sun and the moon. But you also have the terrestrial or the Earth sphere and the celestial or the star sphere. Sun, Earth, moon and stars, core themes behind this. And again, sun, Earth, you can even, for instance, you can see the tilted Earth there, and you can see the zodiac signs, the terrestrial, the Earth, and the celestial, the star sphere, and of course, sun and moon. And same again, sun, earth, moon and stars, but the plumb, the ruler, the compass, the square, all these tools of construction and measurement are at the basis of Freemasonry still to this day, but this developed out of the craft guilds, the people who built the great cathedrals, and going back in time to the Masons of Greek and Roman times, going back even further to Persian and Babylonian stonemasons, construction architects, engineers. These have been standards throughout time, and now they're symbols, but they're still so vital, so important. And so, for instance, modern tracing boards, again, you know, the plumb bob, the compass, the square, the level, sun and moon references, and you can see faint references to stars, and of course we stand on the Earth, so the Earth's included, but there's a nice little more modern depiction there. And even sort of older, again, the shackle, key lifting tool, key construction tool, key measuring tools, and sun and moon, and the seven, well, it's probably the Pleiades, but that's for something else. And also, not to forget, we have the three columns: Doric, Ionic, Doric, Corinthian, and Ionic. Corinthian, Ionic, Doric. And, well, there you can see it's a Doric column, a very simple capital. There we can see the Ionic column, but we can see the swirls there. And there we see the acanthus sleeves of the Corinthian column. So these symbols have been passed on. Now I'll get to Doric, Ionic, Corinthian I've talked about. But just as a recap, and no pun intended because it just has to be the capstone, ancient engineers, architects, masons had to be working off a standard measurement. And for instance, the capstone here found next to the red pyramid, well, that had the 1 meter, which of course recent the pendulum, but also the Royal Egyptian cubits there, 3, which is pi over 2 meters. Again, another example of the modern archaeologists tend to be trained in the arts, and they don't really like measurement or science. They sort of call everything a religious artifact, and that's it. And somehow they're all primitive. And okay, that's a rant. I won't go into that, but the Salamis stone is another beautiful example. Mark Wilson Jones did the initial discovery and work into this, and what we have here is just like the capstone. What we have is a conversion tool between different units of measurement. I did a whole series on this regard to Parthenon, how it connects to other pyramid proportions, pyramid relevant measures, and also how that connects to India and other places. But what we have is the Salamis stone, Mark Wilson Jones. What we have is the Doric, Ionic, and the common foot. So Doric and Ionic, as in the Freemasonic tracing board, still very important part of, going back to the craft guild, still very important to this day. And again, we have the appearance of the so-called modern English foot back in Greek, Hellenistic Greek times, but we also have the Samian foot. So on the inside, we have multiple references to these units, but the perimeter, so the length and the height of the stone is a direct conversion tool to Samian, and that's going to be an important feature. Doric, Ionic, and Samian as feet and units of measure. So there's just another, again, the key nut, this stone, 2:3, Vesica ratio, covered that earlier videos, even in regards to the scaling of the pyramids in Egypt, from one to another, and how important these units are. Sun, Earth, and Moon, and that will be the feature. So the previous episode was the focus on the sidereal month, 27.3, being so vital in it, but that number also linked the sun as well, but a sidereal month, one orbit of the moon around the Earth in relation to a star, so it's a relationship of Earth, moon and star. Now I want to talk about the relationship of sun, Earth and moon, or the Synodic month, which is the full moon month that we're most comfortable with. So just as an example, one orbit of the moon around the Earth in relation to the sun, that's a Synodic month, 29.53 days, give or take a fraction because of elliptical orbits, 12.369 per year. Previously I talked about the sidereal month, which is one orbit around the Earth in relation to a star. That happens every 27.3 days, and that's 13.369 times per year, which is interesting because there are 12.369 synodic months or full moons per year, plus one we get the sidereal month. I'll get into that soon because that connects to some other very key important ancient knowledge, the 153 fish in the Bible, but also going back to Egypt. They've written this in very cunning ways. They've written it in weights and measures, as well as in encoded it in their symbols and their legends as well for the non-initiated, so to speak. So because you had the common people, but you had the mystery schools and the priests in there who were behind all of this, and yes, a bit like the initiation built in. So the difference between the exoteric, which is almost like common knowledge, but then you have the esoteric, which is the initiated knowledge. 29.53. I'll repeat it again later, but so it takes 29.53 days for the moon to orbit the Earth in relation to the sun, and if you multiply the diameter of the Earth by 29.53, you also get the distance from the Earth to the moon. Measurements of time and measurements of distance in relationship to one another, very important. Another key harmony, which is really, okay, I won't go into those. And so now the feature will be, so showed earlier, stone circles, how they've Coffmere Wood and Lone Head of Davitt moon observation temples at 27.3 being the measure built in multiple times, across the circle, across the recumbent altar as well. But now we're going to have a look at 29.53 days, or the synodic month, sun, earth and moon relationship. And of course it's, well, the proportion, the vesica is hiding this in plain sight, another reference to so many of these aspects. But yep, weights and measures, this is a very solid way to do this. We can literally weigh and measure it, as opposed to more subjective methods. I'll put the link in the description. I mentioned this and linked it earlier, but there's a video series I did on New York, across Paris, across Australia, across DC, Brasilia, Astana and all these other places. Now, there was one number that kept appearing, and that was 295.3125, or shifted decimal point. And here he points out the connections there between the Rollright Stones, which or the Kingsmen, 108 feet at the widest, but using Petrie's method in the inside, 103.5, which gives us a circumference of 295.306 feet. Very important number, because there are 229.53, give or take a fraction, depending because of elliptical orbit, days per synodic month. That's the full moon. That's the month which is so important in predicting eclipses. And so this link will be in there. There's a whole bunch of other interesting stuff in here, and mentions Petrie, Tom, Alexander Tom, and some others, and how the Saxon / Indus / Sumerian feet connects as well. Previous episode I mentioned how that's appearing in South America in Monte Alban. And so 295.3, and that will be the focus of this particular point. But so in the previous episode and the one prior to that, I was sort of talking about Seahenge and the importance of Seahenge. Now, I also mentioned Casado in southern France, near the famous Karnak, and the, like, for instance, the Menic alignments and how that connects as well. And also amongst it, like, so it's 98 feet wide, 82 feet long, has a 21 foot passage. Now I've got a slow connection, so it'll be, but there we have the varying Casado, the tumulus, and of course the ziggurat of So Seahenge 1, 21 feet diameter, Casado has a 21 foot long passage, and the ziggurat of 210 feet at its longest dimension. It has been reconstructed. Older descriptions do put it at 210 feet, and the people who mentioned it at that measurement, of course, they wasn't using feet, but they were using an older measurement which converts to the, well, actually the English foot was back then, but they were not using it in their descriptions, but it does match. So still question, because it's been rebuilt, and depends on what source you choose, you can get a slight variation. However, now I want to have a look at, we're going to go to, so okay, I mentioned the Rollright Stones. Stonehenge would also figure in here, but we have again a stone circle arrangement, 108 feet at its widest, but the other diameter would give a circumference of 295.3 feet. And now I want to extend that, because first let's go to Arbelowhenge. John Hill, I linked him in the previous video, I'll link him again. He's done some awesome work in regards to standard measurements across for 9 ladies, and Arbelowhenge is one of the features of there. We'll also have a look at the Hurler Stones. So we'll be going Ireland, Scotland, and England in this particular one. So we have the Hurler Stones we see here. Actually, Hurler Stones won't be featured, but we will be looking at grey weathers, which is because Hurler Stones includes 108 feet diameter. The 2 grey weather stones, we have the southern circle 108 feet, the northern circle 105 feet. Okay, now we go up to Scotland. We have the Steness stone circle, and we have Brodgar. Now, there was a recent study done by the University Ring of Brodgar. Recent study done, University of Adelaide did a statistical analysis of these stone circles, and they found, like, at 99.999% that they're astronomically aligned. Again, it's this archeo-astronomy's not too favourable amongst the establishment. We'll also be having a look at the Ring of Brodgar. Okay, also at Newgrange in Ireland, a famous, very famous site there. Again, aligned to the, is it midwinter or summer? Off the top of my head, I can't remember, but there's some very important site, some awesome other features, but we'll be examining that as well as Avebury, another famous big henge with smaller stone alignments on the inside. And of course, mentioned in previous episodes how the connections at West Kennet Longbarrow, also Silbury Hill as well. Another one which we'll be looking at, which is again going to connect all these places together through these very important astronomical numbers, is Long Meg and her sisters. And so that's most of the places we'll be looking at, but now I'm going to be drawing them, connecting them together. Previous episode, I looked at the recumbent stone circles in the northeast of Scotland, such as Coffey Muir Wood and Lone Head of Daviot, and how they connected through 27.3 to places such as Seahenge 1, and by definition then also Casado, also the Ziggurat of But what joins these together? The connection between these sites is, number one, archeo-astronomy, but they're aligned to such as the equinox, the solstices as well. Yet in their measures in there, there is a whole lot more the connections now. Previously, the 27.3 drew those, which also connects to Egypt and the Indus through their systems of measurement as well. But now we're going to be looking at the 29.53 day cycle, which is the definition of the relationship between Sun, Earth and Moon, the Sinaitic Month. So the last two episodes began with a feature on Seahenge, how the larger complex there also connects to West Kent Long Barrow, Menic alignments, Avebury and other places with these seemingly standard units which might be dismissed as because it's just a measure. Well, no, it's actually loaded with info. And for instance, at 21 feet, that's 295.312.125 Samian fingers. If that's using the Salamis stone, this ancient conversion tool, brings these together. Well, that will also connect with Casado. Now at 82 feet, that's also 273, which is a double reference. So we have the Synodic and the sidereal month just happening to appear at these particular units of measurement. Again, 295.3125, just like with the Rollright Stones in that article, which I'll link in the description. The Ziggurat of Ur being a temple to the moon. Again, these references to especially sun and moon, and the Synodic month of 29.53 days is the relationship of sun, earth and moon. And at 210 feet wide, it's now 2953.125 Samian fingers. Now, Greyweather stone. Now, it's one of these which has 108 feet diameter, like so many other, not just stone circles in the UK, but also you'll find it in the Axum obelisk. You'll find it in the Great Pool of Mohenjo-Daro. You'll find it in the Abu Simbel and many other places. But 108 being a vital number connected to the moon. So, for instance, if you multiply the diameter of the moon times 108, you get the distance from the moon to the Earth. If you multiply the diameter of the Earth by 29.53, as in a number of days in a Synodic month, you get the distance from the Earth to the moon. Both of these numbers are very vital. 108 sort of gets the most focus, but eventually 295.3 in this Synodic month is going to have to catch on. But the important feature about it is that the smaller circle, the north circle, is 105 feet. Well, to begin with, that's a 33 to 32 ratio. Bang, you've got some really important stuff going on there. But the key feature is that it's 295.3125 Doric hands. Using this, the so-called modern English foot was found in the Salamis stone. This was probably not the origin of it, because the Greeks inherited so much stuff from earlier cultures, and then those cultures inherited it from earlier cultures. And this, we'll have a look more. So, okay, Stenes. 144 with the henge, but the stone circle 105, just like previous. And again, 295.3125. Another example of this measurement. Now, if you go to the Almendras alignment stones in Portugal, 105 feet wide, 295.3125 Doric hands. Again, Doric, Ionic, the Samian scar, which emerges from the Salamis stone, which is the height of the columns in the Parthenon. Not only does it incorporate the proportions of Earth and Moon through the Great Pyramid proportions of 14 to 11, we also have those measurements appearing again. It's also in Sanchits and all these other places, and it's still with us today. It's an ancient legacy of what's been carried on. Arbelo henge, now 170 feet diameter. Well, 170.1 feet is 29.53125 Ionic fathom. So again, Ionic, Doric, Corinthian, and the Samian from the Salamis stone, which is still the Vitruvius, and to this day through the Freemasonic tradition, we have these units of measurement. It's not just the design of the column, they're also ancient units of measure. And now I'm suggesting, because of the sheer evidence, and I'm going to go more and more into this, that these units are actually go back much further. They connect to through the so-called modern English foot, through the pendulum and the Egyptian royal cubit at E-1, which is the second, which gives us 86,400 seconds per day, which is the proportion of the Great Pyramid to the size of the whole Earth. And now Avebury, the southern circle, 340 feet, so 170 feet times 2. Therefore, the radius, now I'd like, because of definitions, this is at the widest point, 340.2 feet. Would that be incorporated in there? Because it would be extraordinary that they're using 340 feet exactly. That would be on its own. So 170.1 feet gives us 29.5 R3 ionic fathom again. Ring of Brodgar back up in Scotland, 340 feet diameter. So therefore the radius, 29.53125, the amount of days in a Sinaitic month, the proportion of the size of the Earth in relation to its distance from the Moon. Longmeg and her daughters, 340 feet at its diameter at its widest, just like 340 feet. The southern circle in Avebury at its widest. All these things are slightly egg-shaped, and here I'm saying there's a message in here. So it's the widest, and you have to incorporate all of these, and again, 29.53125 ionic fathom. Newgrange in Ireland, what's going on? The Great Ring diameter, 340 feet. Get the same thing going again, therefore the radius. However, the curb, or like the mound itself, is 260 feet at its narrowest and 280 feet at its widest. Once again, we're talking the widest, and what does that convert to? 295.3125 Samian inches. Back to C inch. You see what these places are astronomically connected. That's more and more. It's just been proven as a fact. Now, they also just happen to share, even when they appear to be different, they share the same proportions, dimensions, and sometimes the dimension is blatantly obvious. And so we have across England up to Scotland, we're having, for instance, 340 feet. And this is from the southern part, the middle part, and even, again to Scotland, and also over to this very important Newgrange in Ireland. So I'm going to follow up with this, but yeah, okay, there'll be more to come. So as a recap, the importance of these particular numbers: it's a reference to time, it's a reference to distance, 29.53 days per Synodic month or full moon, but also if we use that same element of time, 29.53, multiply it by the diameter of the Earth, we get the distance from the Earth to the Moon. Beautiful connections between Sun, Earth and Moon. And so here's just an example of what I mean. So one orbit of the Moon around the Earth in relation to the Sun. So we had the Earth, Moon and Sun lined up. 29.53 days later, they will come back to one another. And of course there's another illustration of that. So 29.53 is the time. Now this was understood, it goes back to even Babylonian tablets describe this. They understood this. It wasn't rounded off to the 30-day months that we use. That's where the 30-day month comes from. It's based on the full moon. Now this particular alignment happens 12.369 times per year. That's the square root of 153 if you're into your esoteric and your history and your legends in regards to these things. 153 fish, for instance. So the square root of that is 12.369. That's the number of Synodic months, full moons per year. However, I mentioned in the previous episode and at the beginning of this presentation that 27.3 days is a sidereal month, which is an alignment of Earth, Moon and stars. That happens 13.369 times per year. That's a square root of 153 plus 1. Why is this plus 1 minus 1 interesting? Well, phi plus 1 is phi squared. Phi minus 1 equals 1 over phi. You'll also find it in other elements, this very beautiful plus 1 minus 1 connection that goes on between these things. But the sidereal month, Synodic month, is also what describes the eclipse. The moon is 400 times smaller than the sun, but the sun is 400 times further away, and that's why on the eclipse it appears to be of the same size. Because the moon orbits in a wobble up and down, we do not get an eclipse every 29.53 days. That's why it doesn't happen, but they do align every 29.53 days viewed from above, but it has to happen also on the horizontal, so to speak, as well, along the ecliptic. And the vesica, of course, embeds 153, and it also seems to describe the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon, Earth and the stars, of course, is just a standard theme going back across time and across culture, but it's especially strong in the Hermetic tradition. The sun represents gold and the moon represents silver, for instance, in alchemy and Mercury. All these things come together. I've done some series on those. Now, there'll be some other links in the description as well, but also throughout this mention the Doric, the Ionic, and the Samian foot measures, which comes from the Salamis stone. I'll try to remember to drop that link. I've put it in previous links in this series anyway. But these columns and this knowledge, which we would more, is connected to the Freemasonic tradition now at the moment, extends back through the craft guilds, going back to the Greco-Roman times, and of course the Romans and the Greeks inherited so much from previous cultures, and so what stays with us today through most commonly known is the Freemasonic traditions, as in emerge from the stonemason craft guilds, has its basis in ancient times and before the Greeks, before the Romans, before the Persians, going back throughout, and we can, as we saw, it's also crosses over into, well, France and Portugal and England, Ireland and Scotland, and of course again this is just the tip of the iceberg. We have a lot more information to come in regards to this, and again weights and measures, empirical type of evidence. And so with that, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a good one.